I was halfway through my morning coffee when someone started pounding on my front door like the house was on fire. The January snow had been falling steadily all night, leaving about 8 inches of fresh powder across our quiet suburban street in Naperville, Illinois. I set down my mug and walked to the door, expecting maybe a delivery driver or a neighbor with an actual emergency. What I got instead was Brenda Morrison, vice president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association, standing on my porch with her arms crossed, and that pinched expression she always wore when she thought she had caught someone breaking the rules. "Mr. Xavier," she said, not waiting for me to greet her. "I've been standing outside for 10 minutes waiting for you to come out and start shoveling." I blinked at her, genuinely confused. "Good morning, Brenda. Shoveling what exactly?" She pointed dramatically toward the sidewalk. "The snow, obviously. It's been more than 6 hours since it stopped falling, which means you're in violation of HOA Regulation 47B, subsection 3. All walkways must be cleared within 6 hours of snowfall cessation." I glanced at my watch. It was 7:30 in the morning. "Brenda, it stopped snowing at 3 a.m. I was asleep. I was planning to shovel after breakfast." "Planning doesn't matter," she snapped. "The rules are the rules. And while you're at it, you need to shovel my walkway too. Since you're already going to be doing yours, it only makes sense that you help out your HOA representative." I leaned against the door frame, studying her face. She was completely serious. "You want me to shovel your walkway because I'm going to be shoveling mine anyway." "It's about community spirit," Brenda said, as if this explained everything. "We all need to pitch in and help each other, especially when board members like myself work so hard to maintain property values for everyone." "Your house is 4 doors down from mine," I pointed out. "Exactly. Very convenient for you." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that patience was a virtue I had cultivated over 30 years on the bench before retiring last spring. Ethan Xavier, respected circuit court judge, now free from the daily grind of the Cook County judicial system, should not lose his temper over a delusional HOA board member. "Brenda, I'll shovel my own walkway after I finish my breakfast. I will not be shoveling yours." "You have a perfectly capable teenage son who could do it, and I believe I saw a snowblower in your garage last summer." Her face flushed red. "This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude that's destroying this neighborhood. Do you know how many complaints I've fielded about your property in the last month? 0, I'd imagine, since I've done nothing wrong. Your holiday decorations stayed up until January 3rd, she said triumphantly. The HOA regulations state they must come down by January 5th. Well, people were talking about it. They thought it looked trashy. Which people? She waved her hand dismissively. That's not the point. The point is you need to be more considerate of the community standards. Now, are you going to shovel my walkway or not? Not. Brenda's eyes narrowed. Fine. You'll be hearing from the HOA board about this, and expect a fine for the late snow removal on your own property too. I'm documenting everything. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of my unshoveled walkway as if she were documenting a crime scene. I closed the door and returned to my coffee, which had gone lukewarm. Welcome to retirement, I thought. 40 minutes later, after finishing my breakfast and getting properly dressed for the cold, I grabbed my shovel and headed outside. The morning sun was bright, making the snow sparkle like diamonds across the street. I actually enjoyed shoveling snow in moderate amounts. It was good exercise, meditative in its repetition, and it gave me time to think. I had just finished clearing my front walkway when I noticed Brenda marching back up the street with another woman in tow. This second woman was taller, with severely styled blonde hair and a puffy white coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. I recognized her immediately as Patricia Thornton, the HOA president, who lived in the largest house in the development at the end of Willow Ridge Court. "Mr. Xavier," Patricia called out in that saccharine sweet voice that always preceded something unpleasant. "I need to speak with you about a serious matter." I leaned on my shovel. "Good morning, Patricia. Brenda has informed me that you refused to assist her with snow removal this morning and that you violated the snow clearing timeline as outlined in our community guidelines." "I completed my snow removal well within the required time frame," I said calmly, "and I'm under no obligation to shovel anyone else's property." Patricia pulled out a tablet from her enormous designer purse and tapped at it importantly. "Actually, according to Regulation 89C, all homeowners are expected to contribute to the collective well-being of the community. This includes assisting board members when reasonable requests are made." "Show me that regulation," I said. She held the tablet to her chest. "It's board policy." "We don't have to show you the entire rule book." "Actually, you do. I have a copy of the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions in my home office. I've read them cover to cover, all 68 pages. There is no Regulation 89C. There are only 70 regulations total, and none of them require homeowners to perform manual labor for board members." Patricia's smile became strained. "Perhaps you're looking at an outdated version. We've made several amendments this year." "Then you're required by Illinois state law to provide all homeowners with copies of those amendments 30 days before they take effect." "I've received nothing." Brenda jumped in. "This is exactly the kind of hostile, argumentative behavior we've been dealing with, Patricia. He's clearly not a good fit for our community." I felt my jaw tighten. I had lived in this house for 3 years, kept my property immaculate, never once complained about anything, and generally kept to myself while being cordial to my actual neighbors. The only people I'd ever had problems with were these two and the rest of their little power-hungry HOA board. "Are we done here?" I asked. "I have things to do today." "We're far from done," Patricia said coldly. "You can expect a formal hearing notice about your violations and your attitude. The board takes these matters very seriously." They walked away, heads together, already scheming. I finished clearing the end of my driveway where the snowplow had left a heavy pile, then went inside to warm up. I knew this wasn't over. People like Patricia and Brenda thrived on control and got genuinely offended when someone challenged their perceived authority. In my years as a judge, I had seen plenty of petty tyrants who used whatever small power they had to make other people's lives miserable. The difference was, in my courtroom, I could shut that behavior down. Out here in the realm of the HOA, they thought they were untouchable. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the Whispering Pines HOA board. Inside was a notice of violation, a $300 fine for delayed snow removal and failure to maintain community standards, and a summons to appear before the board at their next meeting in 1 week. The letter was written in the most pompous, pseudo-legal language I had seen outside of a first-year law student's homework assignment. They cited regulations that didn't exist, used incorrect legal terminology, and made several claims that would never hold up under any kind of scrutiny. I sat at my kitchen table, reading the letter 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise with each pass. Then I did what I always did when facing a legal matter. I started documenting everything. I pulled up the original HOA documents I'd received when I purchased the house. I photographed the timestamps on the snowfall and when I'd completed my shoveling. I reviewed the Illinois compiled statutes regarding homeowners associations, specifically the Common Interest Community Association Act. And I started preparing my defense, not because I needed to prove my innocence in any legal sense, but because I wanted to make a point. The day before the board meeting, my next-door neighbor, Frank Wilson, knocked on my door. Frank was a retired electrician in his 70s, a genuinely nice guy who'd lived in the development since it was first built 15 years ago. "Ethan, you got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, come on in, coffee. That'd be great." He settled into my kitchen chair with a heavy sigh. "I heard about your trouble with Patricia and Brenda. Word travels fast. This neighborhood's worse than high school sometimes," Frank said. "Look, I wanted to give you a heads up. They're planning to really come after you at the meeting tomorrow. They've been calling board members, lining up support. For what? I didn't do anything wrong." Frank shook his head. "That doesn't matter to them. You stood up to them and they can't have that. They're talking about more fines, restrictions on your property use, maybe even trying to force you out." "They can't force me out. I own my home." "Technically, no, but they can make your life hell until you decide to leave on your own. I've seen them do it before. The Hendersons, about 6 years back, they had a dispute over fence height. Patricia wasn't president then, but she was on the board. They fined the Hendersons into the ground, put liens on their property, made them fight every little thing. Eventually, the Hendersons sold and moved away just to escape the harassment." I sipped my coffee, processing this. "Why are you telling me this, Frank?" "Because you seem like a good guy, and because I'm tired of watching them bully people. But also because I heard through the grapevine what you used to do for a living. Rita Martinez, 3 doors down. Her daughter clerked at Cook County Courthouse. She recognized your name, looked you up. Judge Ethan Xavier retired last year after 30 years on the bench. Civil and criminal court, known for being fair but tough, especially on people who abuse the system." I couldn't help but smile slightly. "Rita's daughter, Sarah, good clerk, smart woman, so it's true." "It's true." Frank leaned back, a slow grin spreading across his weathered face. "Oh, this is going to be good. Patricia and Brenda have no idea, do they? I don't advertise my past career. I'm retired. I just want to live quietly." "Well, quiet's about to get loud tomorrow night. That meeting's at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse. I'll be there. A lot of us will be. Some to support Patricia because they're too scared not to, but some of us want to see someone finally stand up to this board properly." After Frank left, I spent the rest of the day preparing. I printed out relevant statutes, highlighted passages in the HOA governing documents, prepared a timeline of events with photographic evidence, and drafted a statement. I also made some phone calls to colleagues who'd specialized in property law and HOA disputes. One of them, Michael Chen, laughed for a full minute when I explained the situation. "They demanded you shovel the board members' walkway," he wheezed. "Oh man, Ethan, I wish I could be there to see this. It gets better. They're claiming regulations that don't exist and threatening me with fines and restrictions. That's actionable. You know that, right? If they're making up rules and enforcing them, that's a violation of state law. The association has to follow its own governing documents. They can't just invent restrictions." "I know. The question is how far I want to push this. My advice? Push hard. These little tyrant boards get away with this garbage because most homeowners don't know their rights and can't afford to fight back. You're in a unique position. You have the knowledge and the resources. Make an example of them, within legal bounds, of course." Michael sent me some case files from similar disputes, including a particularly relevant Illinois Supreme Court decision from 2 years ago that had slapped down an HOA board for exceeding its authority. By the time evening came, I had a banker's box full of materials and a clear strategy. The next night, I arrived at the community clubhouse at 6:50 p.m. The room was set up like a small hearing chamber, with a long table at the front for the board members and rows of folding chairs for homeowners. About 30 people were already there. Some I recognized, many I didn't. Frank gave me a nod from the third row. I took a seat in the front row, setting my box of materials beside me. At precisely 7 o'clock, the 5 board members filed in. Patricia took the center seat, with Brenda on her right. The other 3 were Walter Green, the treasurer, a nervous-looking man who always seemed like he'd rather be anywhere else; Donna Sheffield, the secretary, who Patricia had clearly chosen because she never disagreed with anything; and Marcus Webb, the architectural committee chair, who at least seemed relatively reasonable most of the time. Patricia banged a gavel, which seemed absurdly theatrical. "This meeting of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association is now in order. We have several items on tonight's agenda, but we'll begin with a disciplinary matter concerning homeowner Ethan Xavier. Mr. Xavier, please come forward." I stood and walked to the small table they'd set up facing the board, bringing my materials with me. Patricia shuffled some papers. "Mr. Xavier, you've been summoned here tonight to address multiple violations of community standards. Specifically, failure to remove snow in a timely manner on January 4th, failure to assist a board member when requested, and displaying a hostile and argumentative attitude toward board representatives. How do you respond to these charges?" "I respond that they're completely baseless and that this board is operating outside its legal authority," I said calmly. A murmur went through the crowd. Patricia's face flushed. "Excuse me, let me be more specific." I pulled out the first document from my box. "This is the recorded HOA covenant, conditions and restrictions, filed with Kane County in October 2009. These are the actual rules that govern this community. According to Article 3, Section 7, homeowners have 6 hours from the cessation of snowfall to clear their walks. I cleared mine within 4 hours and 13 minutes. Here are photographs with timestamps proving this." I held up the photos. Walter leaned forward, actually looking interested. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "The exact timing isn't the issue. The issue is your refusal to help when asked, and your bad attitude. Show me where in the governing documents it states that homeowners must perform manual labor for board members upon request," I said. Brenda stood up. "We don't have to justify every little thing to you. The board has the authority to make reasonable requests for the good of the community. Actually, you do have to justify it. Under the Illinois Common Interest Community Association Act, Section 1-60, an association must operate in accordance with its governing instruments and state law. You cannot create new rules or requirements without following proper amendment procedures, which include notice to all homeowners and a vote. You've done neither." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You seem to know an awful lot about the law, Mr. Xavier." "I should. I spent 30 years as a circuit court judge for Cook County before retiring last year." The room went completely silent. I could see the blood draining from Patricia's face. Brenda sat down hard, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "I didn't mention this before because I don't like to trade on my former position," I continued. "I'm retired. I want to live quietly, but I also won't tolerate being bullied or having my rights violated. So let me be very clear about what's going to happen here. First, you're going to rescind this ridiculous fine. Second, you're going to issue a formal apology. Third, you're going to provide all homeowners with a complete and accurate copy of the actual rules, not whatever made-up versions you've been working from." Patricia found her voice, though it was shaky. "You can't come in here and make demands. We are the duly elected board of this association, and you're bound by law just like everyone else. In fact, more so, because you've accepted a fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of all homeowners, not to abuse your position for personal benefit. Making another homeowner shovel your walkway, that's abuse of position. Inventing regulations that don't exist, that's fraud. Threatening fines and restrictions without legal basis, that's harassment and possibly extortion." Marcus Webb cleared his throat. "Judge Xavier, I apologize for not recognizing you earlier. I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot here. Perhaps we should table this matter and review our procedures." "Finally, someone talking sense," I said. "But we're not just tabling it. This matter needs to be resolved tonight properly." Patricia was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. "We had legitimate concerns about community standards. No, you had a power trip because I wouldn't submit to an unreasonable demand. There's a difference." I pulled out another document. "This is a summary of Illinois case law regarding HOA authority. I have 6 cases here, including Martinez versus Oakbrook Homeowners Association, where the Illinois Supreme Court ruled that HOAs must strictly adhere to their governing documents and cannot expand their authority through selective enforcement or made-up rules. The homeowners in that case were awarded damages and attorney fees. "Are you threatening to sue us?" Brenda asked, her voice high and tight. "I'm informing you of your legal obligations. Whether a lawsuit becomes necessary depends entirely on how you proceed from here." Frank stood up from his seat in the audience. "I'd like to say something, Madam President." Patricia looked like she wanted to refuse, but too many people were watching. "Fine. Homeowner comments. I've lived in this community for 15 years. I've watched 4 different boards, and I have to say this current one is the worst I've seen. You fine people for tiny infractions while board members violate rules constantly. Brenda's son plays basketball in their driveway at all hours, which violates the noise ordinance. Patricia's contractor trucks were parked on the street for 3 weeks during her kitchen remodel, which violates the parking rules. But regular homeowners get fined for having a garbage can visible for 5 minutes after pickup. The double standard is ridiculous, and it's about time someone called it out." Several other people stood up, voices overlapping. A woman named Jennifer said the board had fined her for having the wrong shade of white paint on her trim. A man named Robert talked about being threatened with violations for having a car in his driveway that Patricia thought was too old, even though it ran fine. Another woman, Teresa, described being harassed about her garden decorations that were well within the rules, but that Brenda personally found tacky. The meeting devolved into chaos, with Patricia banging her gavel repeatedly and demanding order. I sat back down, letting the homeowners vent their frustrations. This was actually better than I'd planned. I'd expected to fight this battle alone, but the community clearly had a lot of pent-up anger at the board's overreach. Finally, Marcus Webb stood up and raised his hands. "Everyone, please. Please, let's calm down." The room gradually quieted. "I think it's clear we have some serious issues to address. I propose we form a committee to review all board actions over the past year and ensure we're operating properly. Judge Xavier, would you be willing to chair such a committee?" "No," I said. "I'm not interested in running anything, but I'll serve on it as a regular member if other homeowners are included." "I'll serve," Frank said immediately. "Me too," Jennifer added. 5 others volunteered. Patricia looked like she was going to be sick. "The board doesn't have to agree to this. Actually, according to your own bylaws, Article 5, homeowners can petition for a committee formation with 20% of residents signing on. We have about 200 homes in this development, so that's 40 signatures. I count 8 volunteers already. I'm guessing we can get the rest by tomorrow. Walter, who'd been silent most of the meeting, spoke up quietly. Patricia, I think we should agree to this. I've been uncomfortable with some of our enforcement actions for a while now. This could be good for everyone. Whose side are you on? Brenda hissed at him. The side of following the law, he replied, showing more backbone than I'd expected. Patricia knew she was cornered. Fine. We'll allow the committee, but all findings have to be approved by the board before any changes are made. No, I said. The committee's findings and recommendations go directly to the full membership. They vote on any proposed changes. That's how it works in a properly functioning association. We went back and forth for another 20 minutes, but ultimately, I had the law on my side and increasingly had the room's support. We agreed to form an oversight committee, conduct a full review of board actions, and hold a special meeting in 30 days to present findings. The fine against me was rescinded, though Patricia couldn't quite bring herself to apologize directly. As people filed out after the meeting ended, several homeowners came up to shake my hand and thank me. Rita Martinez, whose daughter had recognized me, smiled warmly. I'm so glad you moved here, Judge Xavier. We've needed someone like you. Just Ethan, please. I'm not a judge anymore. Once a judge, always a judge, she said. It's about character, not the title. Frank walked out with me toward our cars. That was beautiful. Did you see Patricia's face when you told them who you were? I didn't want to play that card, but they left me no choice. Think they'll actually follow through with the committee, or will they try to stonewall it? They'll try something, I said. People like that don't give up power easily. But now everyone's watching. That makes it harder for them to operate in the shadows. I was right about them trying something. Over the next week, I received 3 more letters from the HOA. The first claimed I had violated a newly discovered regulation about the color of my mailbox. The second said my landscaping needed pre-approval even though it had been in place for 2 years. The third threatened daily fines if I didn't submit to a property compliance inspection within 48 hours. I documented everything, made copies, and sent a formal cease and desist letter to the board, copying all members individually. I pointed out that retaliatory actions against homeowners who challenge board decisions are explicitly prohibited under Illinois law and could result in personal liability for board members, not just the association. That got Walter's attention. He called me the next evening. Judge Xavier, this is Walter Green. I want you to know I didn't approve those letters to you. Patricia and Brenda sent them without consulting the full board. That's a violation of your own bylaws, I said. Board actions require a majority vote. I know. I've been reviewing the bylaws since the meeting, actually reading them for the first time in detail, and I'm horrified by how much we've been doing wrong. Patricia basically runs everything and just tells us to sign off on her decisions. I usually do because I don't want the conflict, but after hearing all those homeowners the other night, I can't keep going along with it. Then don't. You're a board member. You have a duty to the community, not to Patricia. I'm going to resign from the board, he said. I can't be part of this anymore. Walter, I understand the impulse, but that might not be the best move. If you resign, Patricia just appoints someone who'll rubber stamp everything she wants. If you stay, you're a voice of reason and a check on her power. He was quiet for a long moment. I never thought about it that way. You've got at least one ally in Marcus. He seems like he wants to do the right thing. That's 2 votes out of 5. You might not be able to stop everything, but you can slow down the worst of it and make sure there's a record of dissent. When this comes before the full membership, that record will matter. Okay, he said slowly. Okay, I'll stay, and Judge Xavier, thank you, for the spine, I mean. Over the next 2 weeks, the Oversight Committee met 3 times. Besides Frank, Jennifer, and myself, we had Teresa, Robert, and 3 others named Sandra, Michael, and Dan. We divided up the work, each taking different aspects of board operations to review. What we found was worse than I'd expected. Jennifer discovered that Patricia had approved several contracts with vendors without competitive bids, including a landscaping company owned by her brother-in-law. The association was paying 30% more than market rate. Sandra found that Brenda had been charging personal expenses to the HOA account, including gas and restaurants, claiming they were community business without any documentation. Robert pulled records showing the board had collected over $40,000 in fines over the past 2 years, but only about half of that money had been deposited into the association account. The rest was just gone, with vague notations about administrative costs. I focused on the legal compliance issues. The board had passed 16 new regulations in the past 18 months without following proper amendment procedures. They'd issued over 300 violation notices, most for infractions that weren't actually in the governing documents. And they'd placed liens on 4 properties for unpaid fines that were legally questionable at best. "This is fraud," Sandra said at our 3rd meeting, staring at the documents spread across my dining room table. "This is actual criminal fraud, isn't it?" "Possibly," I said carefully. "At minimum, it's serious financial mismanagement and breach of fiduciary duty. The missing fine money is particularly concerning. That could be embezzlement." "Should we go to the police?" Michael asked. "Not yet. First, we present our findings to the membership. Give Patricia and Brenda a chance to explain or resign. If they refuse and if we confirm actual criminal activity, then yes, we'd have an obligation to report it." Frank leaned back in his chair. "They're going to fight this with everything they've got. Let them. We have documentation." That's all that matters. The special meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon to maximize attendance. The board tried to cancel it twice, claiming procedural issues, but our committee held firm. The clubhouse was packed when I arrived at 2 p.m. Every seat was filled and people lined the walls. The tension in the room was palpable. Patricia called the meeting to order, her face tight with anger. "This special meeting has been called by a group of homeowners concerning board operations. I want to state for the record that the board has full confidence in its actions and procedures. This meeting is a waste of everyone's time." "Noted," I said, standing. "But we're here now, so let's proceed." The Oversight Committee has spent the past month reviewing board actions, financial records, and compliance with governing documents and state law. What we've found is deeply troubling. I spent the next 45 minutes presenting our findings, passing around copies of documentation, showing the math on overcharged contracts and missing funds. The room grew increasingly restless, angry murmurs building as each new revelation came to light. When I finished, Jennifer stood up. "I want to know where the missing fine money went. That's $20,000 that should be in our association account. Patricia, Brenda, where is it?" Patricia's face was crimson. "Those funds were used for legitimate association expenses. The accusations being made here are slanderous." "Then show us the receipts," Robert said. "Show us the documentation for those expenses." "We don't have to answer to you people," Brenda snapped. "We're the board. You elected us to make decisions, and that's what we've done." Marcus stood up at the board table. "Patricia, I've been asking you for that documentation too. You keep telling me it's being organized. I'm the architectural committee chair, but I've been kept out of most financial decisions. I've asked to review contracts and you've refused. That's not how this is supposed to work." "You're betraying the board," Patricia said coldly. "I'm upholding my duty to the community," Marcus replied, "which is what we all should have been doing from the start." Dan, one of our committee members, raised his hand. "I move that we vote to remove the current board and hold immediate elections for new officers." "You can't do that," Patricia said. "That's not proper procedure." "Actually, it is," I said, pulling out the bylaws. Article 7, Section 4. The membership can vote to remove any or all board members for cause with a 2/3 majority. Financial mismanagement and failure to follow governing documents constitute cause. "This is a coup," Brenda said shrilly. "You're all ganging up on us because you don't like being held to standards." "The only standard I don't like is the double standard where you charge homeowners for things you don't enforce on yourselves," Frank said. "Like your son's constant driveway basketball at 10 p.m., Brenda. I've complained 4 times and you've done nothing." The vote was called. Of the 163 homeowners present, 141 voted to remove the entire board. Only 15 voted against and 7 abstained. Patricia stood up, shaking. "You haven't heard the last of this. I'll sue every one of you for defamation." "I'd advise against that," I said quietly. "Discovery in a defamation suit would require you to produce all those missing financial records under oath. Are you sure that's a road you want to go down?" She grabbed her purse and stormed out, Brenda following behind her. Donna looked lost for a moment, then scurried after them. Walter and Marcus remained. "I'd like to nominate Marcus Webb for HOA president," Walter said. "He's the only one of us who tried to do things right." Marcus was elected, along with a new board that included Walter staying on as treasurer, Frank as vice president, Jennifer as secretary, and 2 other longtime residents as at-large members. The first thing the new board did was authorize me to send a formal demand letter to Patricia and Brenda requiring them to provide full accounting of all association funds and contracts. They had 7 days to respond. They didn't. On day 8, I filed a complaint with the Illinois Attorney General's office and the Kane County State's Attorney. White-collar crime wasn't usually prosecuted aggressively, but the documentation we had was solid, and the amount of money involved crossed the threshold that made it a felony. 2 weeks later, I was working in my garden when I saw the police cars pull up to Patricia's house. She was arrested that afternoon for embezzlement and fraud. Brenda was picked up the next day. Turned out the missing $20,000 was just the beginning. When forensic accountants dug into the records, they found Patricia had been skimming association funds for 3 years, totaling over $75,000. She'd created fake invoices, charged personal expenses, and had even forged other board members' signatures on checks. The trial was 8 months later. I didn't testify, as I wasn't involved in the financial investigation, but several members of our committee did. The prosecution had emails between Patricia and Brenda discussing how to hide the money, how to create documentation that would pass a cursory review, and how to intimidate homeowners who asked too many questions. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that she'd had authorization from the board for all her actions, but Walter and Marcus both testified that they'd never approved most of the contracts or expenses, and that Patricia had often forged their signatures or simply lied about having board approval. The jury convicted Patricia on 14 counts of theft and fraud. Brenda took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Patricia in exchange for probation and restitution payments. Patricia was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to repay the full amount stolen plus damages. Her husband divorced her during the trial, and they had to sell their big house at the end of Willow Ridge Court to cover the restitution. As for the HOA, The new board immediately rescinded about 80% of the citations and fines that had been issued over the previous 2 years. We held a series of town halls where homeowners could voice concerns and helped rewrite the enforcement procedures to include transparency and appeals processes. We also amended the governing documents properly this time, with full notice and membership votes to clarify what was and wasn't allowed, removing ambiguous language that the old board had exploited. Frank's house sold that spring, though not because he wanted to leave. He decided to move closer to his daughter in Arizona. On his last day, we sat on his porch with beers, watching the neighborhood kids play in the street. "You know, when you moved in 3 years ago, I thought you were just another quiet guy who'd keep his head down," Frank said. "Glad I was wrong. I tried to keep my head down. They wouldn't let me. Best thing that happened to this neighborhood, Patricia picking the wrong target. If she tried that with anyone else, they probably would have just paid the fine and moved on. But she went after a retired judge who actually knew his rights and wasn't afraid to fight. I spent 30 years watching people abuse whatever power they had," I said. "Saw it in courtrooms, in police departments, in government offices. It's always the same. Someone gets a little authority and decides that makes them special, puts them above the rules. And it keeps happening because most people don't push back. They're too tired, too afraid, too convinced they can't win. But they can win. Sometimes. If they know their rights and are willing to stand up. That's what I try to teach my law clerks. The law only works if people use it. Otherwise, it's just words on paper. You're going to miss it. The courtroom, I mean. I thought about that sipping my beer. Parts of it. I miss the mental challenge, the puzzle of applying law to facts. I miss helping people who genuinely needed the system to work for them. But I don't miss the bureaucracy, the politics, the crushing caseload. And I definitely don't miss the feeling that no matter how many cases I decided, there were always 1,000 more, and I was barely making a dent in the problem. So retirement's been good. Retirement's been excellent. Even with the HOA drama." I gestured at the quiet street, the neat houses, the elm trees that lined the sidewalks. "This is a good neighborhood, Frank. Good people, mostly. Just needed someone to remind the board that they serve the community, not the other way around." After Frank moved, I settled into a genuinely quiet retirement. The new HOA board was competent and reasonable. They enforced the actual rules fairly, kept the common areas maintained, and generally stayed out of people's business unless there was a real problem. Property values stayed stable, the neighborhood remained peaceful, and nobody demanded I shovel their walkway. I took up teaching, part-time at a local law school. Just one seminar course per semester on practical aspects of civil litigation. I found I enjoyed working with students, sharing the lessons I'd learned over 3 decades. I also started volunteering at a legal aid clinic, helping people navigate HOA disputes, landlord-tenant issues, and small claims cases. Turns out there was high demand for someone who knew how to fight back against overreaching authorities, whether that was a slumlord, a predatory lender, or an abusive homeowners association. One afternoon, about a year after Patricia's conviction, I was leaving the legal aid clinic when I saw a familiar figure approaching. It was Brenda Morrison, looking older and worn down. She stopped when she saw me, clearly debating whether to turn around. "Brenda," I said neutrally. "Judge Xavier." She couldn't quite meet my eyes. "I wanted to apologize for everything. The way we treated you, the way we treated everyone, it was wrong." "Yes, it was. I've been going to therapy. Court ordered at first, but I kept going even after I didn't have to anymore. Trying to understand why I acted like that, why I thought it was okay." She finally looked up. My therapist says it was about control. My life felt out of control, my marriage was falling apart, my kids barely talked to me, but on that board I had power. I could tell people what to do and they had to listen. It was intoxicating. A lot of people feel powerless in their lives, I said. That doesn't give them the right to abuse others. I know. I know that now. I'm working on making amends. I've been volunteering at the community center, teaching kids art classes, trying to contribute something positive instead of just tearing people down. She hesitated. Does it ever get better? The guilt, I mean. Do you think I'll ever be able to live with what I did? That's not really my area, I said. I'm a judge, not a priest or a therapist, but I will say this. Guilt can be useful if it motivates change. If it just paralyzes you, it's worthless. You made mistakes, serious ones. You participated in stealing from your neighbors and harassing people who'd done nothing wrong. Those are facts, they happened. But you're also making different choices now. That's also a fact. Which fact defines you going forward is up to you. She nodded slowly. Thank you, I think. That's probably the most honest thing anyone said to me in a long time. Most people aren't honest because they're afraid of conflict. I spent my career in conflict. It doesn't scare me. I noticed, she said with a hint of a smile. For what it's worth, I'm glad you stood up to us. If you hadn't, we would have just kept going, kept getting worse. Probably would have stolen more, hurt more people. You stopped that. After she left, I sat in my car for a while, thinking about power and accountability and the strange paths people's lives take. Brenda would be paying financial restitution for the next 10 years. Patricia would be in prison for at least 3 more. The neighborhood had healed and moved on. And I'd found a new purpose, helping other people navigate the legal system and stand up for their rights. It wasn't the retirement I'd planned when I left the bench. I'd imagined lazy mornings, golf, maybe some travel. Instead, I was busier than ever, just in different ways. But it was meaningful work, and after 30 years of juggling 500 cases at a time, being able to focus on helping one person at a time was refreshing. The following spring, the new HOA board asked me to help draft a resident's Bill of Rights to be incorporated into the governing documents. It outlined clear procedures for enforcement, guaranteed due process rights for anyone accused of violations, required transparency in financial matters, and established strict limits on board authority. It wasn't revolutionary, just common-sense rules that any properly functioning organization should follow. But in the context of HOAs, where boards often operated like fiefdoms, it was significant. We held a community vote on the new provisions, and they passed with 92% approval. At the meeting afterward, Marcus pulled me aside. "You know what the best part of all this is," he said. "We're boring now. Last month's board meeting, we discussed lawn care schedules and approved a budget for repaving the tennis courts. That's it. No drama, no fights, no one getting threatened with fines. Just normal, boring community management. Boring is good," I agreed. "Boring means the system is working like it should." "We're going to present you with a Community Service Award at the summer barbecue," Marcus said. "It's already been decided, so don't try to refuse." I wasn't planning to fight it, I said, but I also didn't do anything special. I just insisted people follow the law. That's more special than you think. Most people don't know how, or they're too intimidated to try. You showed everyone that HOAs aren't immune from accountability, that homeowners have rights, and that standing up to bullies can actually work. The summer barbecue was a nice event, held at the community clubhouse and the surrounding park area. 200 people showed up, which was probably half the neighborhood. Kids ran around playing while adults caught up over burgers and corn on the cob. It felt like what a community should be. People who lived near each other actually knowing and liking one another, not living in fear of arbitrary fines and harassment. When Marcus called me up to receive the award, a plaque with my name and an inscription thanking me for my service to the community, everyone applauded. I said a few words about how communities function best when everyone respects both the rules and each other, and how accountability flows in all directions, from homeowners to boards and boards to homeowners. As I returned to my seat, Rita Martinez caught my eye and mouthed, "Thank you." Jennifer gave me a thumbs up. Frank had sent a card from Arizona that Marcus read aloud, saying he wished he could be there to see the judge get the recognition he deserves for taking down the tyrants. Later, as the sun set and the party wound down, I helped stack chairs and clean up. A young couple I didn't know well approached me. They'd moved in just 2 months earlier. "Judge Xavier, we wanted to introduce ourselves," the woman said. "I'm Amy Chen, and this is my husband David. We bought the Henderson place on Maple Drive." I shook their hands. "Welcome to the neighborhood." "You settling in okay? Actually, that's what we wanted to talk to you about," David said. "Before we bought the house, our real estate agent warned us about the HOA here, said it had a reputation for being difficult. But when we met the neighbors and talked to people, everyone said it was much better now that someone had cleaned things up. We kept hearing your name. It wasn't just me. A lot of people worked together to make changes. But you led it," Amy said, "and we wanted you to know that it mattered. We almost didn't buy here because of the HOA's reputation. But because of what you did, we gave it a chance and we love it. Our kids are happy, the neighbors are friendly, and we're not afraid we're going to get harassed over nonsense." "That's exactly what a neighborhood should be," I said. As I drove home that night, past the neat houses and well-maintained lawns, under streetlights that illuminated peaceful suburban streets, I reflected on the past year and a half. It had started with such a stupid, petty moment. Brenda demanding I shovel her walkway, as if I were her personal servant. If she'd just been polite, if she'd asked nicely instead of demanding, I probably would have helped her. But she'd approached it as an exercise of power, an assertion of authority she didn't actually have. And that one moment had cascaded into investigations, trials, convictions, and ultimately, a complete restructuring of how the HOA operated. All because she'd picked the wrong person to bully, someone who knew the law and wasn't afraid to use it. I'd learned something too, though. I'd left the bench thinking I was done with the law, ready to leave that world behind. But you never really leave it, not when it's been your life's work. The law isn't just courtrooms and judges' robes. It's knowing your rights, holding authorities accountable, helping people navigate systems designed to be intimidating. Those skills didn't stop being valuable just because I retired. If anything, they were more valuable outside the formal legal system, where most people didn't have access to justice unless someone helped them find it. So I kept teaching, kept volunteering, kept being available to neighbors and students and anyone else who needed guidance. And I kept living quietly in my house on Willow Ridge Court in Naperville, Illinois, shoveling my own walkway when it snowed, tending my garden, and occasionally reminding people that HOA boards are not above the law. 6 months after the barbecue, I got a call from a woman named Susan Rogers who lived in a different HOA across town. She'd heard about what happened in Whispering Pines and wanted advice. Her board was threatening to fine her $5,000 because her son's car had been parked in her driveway for more than 48 hours, supposedly violating parking rules. The car belonged to her son, who was deployed with the army in Germany, and the rules cited didn't actually prohibit what she was doing. I walked her through the governing documents, helped her draft a response letter, and explained her rights under both the HOA covenants and the Illinois compiled statutes. 2 weeks later, she called back, thrilled. The board had backed down completely and actually apologized. Turned out several board members were veterans themselves and were horrified when they realized they'd been threatening the mother of a deployed soldier. That led to more calls, more people who'd heard about the judge who helped homeowners fight back against overreaching HOAs. I started getting asked to speak at community meetings, to consult on governing document reviews, to provide training for newly elected board members who wanted to do things right. It became an unofficial specialty, helping homeowners and associations understand their mutual obligations and rights. I even wrote a guide, a simple handbook called Know Your Rights, a homeowner's guide to HOA law in Illinois. It was only 30 pages, written in plain language, covering the basics of how HOAs are supposed to operate, what they can and cannot do, and what recourse homeowners have when boards exceed their authority. I made it available for free online. Within 6 months, it had been downloaded over 10,000 times. The Illinois State Bar Association invited me to present a continuing education seminar for lawyers on HOA litigation. I stood at the podium looking out at 100 attorneys taking notes, and I realized this had become more than just helping my neighborhood. It was a second career, one I'd stumbled into by accident, but that felt just as important as my years on the bench. Because here's what I'd learned. The law doesn't matter unless people know about it and use it. You can have the most perfectly written statutes, the clearest regulations, the fairest procedures, but if people don't understand their rights or are too intimidated to assert them, the law becomes nothing more than a tool for whoever's willing to abuse it. HOAs are a perfect example. They're supposed to be democratic organizations that maintain common areas and reasonable community standards. But they often become petty dictatorships run by people who enjoy having power over their neighbors. And they get away with it because most homeowners don't know that HOAs are constrained by law, that board members have fiduciary duties, that governing documents can't just be made up on the fly. Patricia and Brenda thought they were untouchable. They'd gotten away with their behavior for years because no one had challenged them effectively. They'd learned they could bully, threaten, and steal, and nothing would happen. Until they met someone who knew better and wasn't afraid to fight back. I'm not saying I'm a hero. I'm not. I'm just a retired judge who got angry at being treated unfairly and had the knowledge and resources to do something about it. But if my experience showed other people that they could stand up too, that the system could work when they demanded accountability, then maybe some good came from the whole mess. It's been 3 years now since Brenda knocked on my door demanding I shovel her walkway. Patricia is still in prison, scheduled for release next year. Brenda finished her probation and actually did seem to have changed, though I only see her occasionally at community events. The HOA continues to function smoothly under competent leadership. Property values in the neighborhood have increased, partly because the word got out that Whispering Pines is now a well-run community rather than a cautionary tale. My garden is thriving, full of tomatoes and peppers and herbs. I'm teaching 2 courses this semester instead of 1 because I enjoy it. The legal aid clinic keeps me busy 3 days a week. I've consulted on 11 different HOA disputes in the past year alone, helping homeowners stand up to boards that had forgotten they serve the community, not rule it. And when it snows, I shovel my own walkway, usually while having coffee and enjoying the quiet morning. Sometimes I wave to neighbors doing the same. Nobody demands I shovel for them. Nobody threatens me with fines for imaginary violations. Nobody tries to assert authority they don't have. That's all I ever wanted. Just to live peacefully, follow the actual rules, and be treated fairly. It shouldn't have required a legal battle to achieve that, but sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes you have to stand up, assert your rights, and show bullies that their power is limited and their actions have consequences. The plaque from the community sits on my mantle. Sometimes visitors ask about it, and I tell them the whole story. They're usually surprised that an HOA dispute escalated to criminal trials and prison time, but they shouldn't be. Theft is theft, fraud is fraud, and harassment is harassment, regardless of whether it happens in a corporate boardroom or a suburban HOA meeting. I tell them what I learned. Know your rights, document everything, follow proper procedures, and never let anyone intimidate you out of asserting your legitimate interests. And most importantly, when you have knowledge or resources that others don't, use them not just for yourself, but to help create systems that work fairly for everyone. Because that's what the law is supposed to be about. Not tricks and intimidation, not exploiting power imbalances, not using rules as weapons. It's supposed to be about creating fair processes, protecting rights, and ensuring that everyone, from the most powerful to the least, is held to the same standards. Patricia and Brenda forgot that. They thought their positions on the HOA board made them special, gave them license to do whatever they wanted. They learned differently, the hard way. And in the process, an entire community learned that accountability matters, that standing up to bullies works, and that knowing your rights is the first step to protecting them. So yes, Brenda demanded I shovel her walkway. She didn't know I was a retired judge. But more importantly, she didn't know that I'd spent 30 years fighting exactly the kind of abuse of authority she represented. She thought I'd be like everyone else who'd given in to the board's demands rather than face the hassle of fighting back. She was wrong. And that made all the difference.